I was sitting in my office last week and just closed one of the biggest deals of my career. It was a fee I was really proud of with a large, well-known Fortune 500 client, and I let out a literal squeal because it was a huge win for me. Felt amazing, and I was ready to celebrate. So I turned to high five my coworker Ruby, but the high five never came because I was working from home, and Ruby is my puppy. And unfortunately, she hasn't quite learned that trick yet. So no celebration, no fanfare, pretty standard affair for this new hybrid world we now live in. And it made me nostalgic for those days I used to work in an office, and my teammates would overhear me closing a big deal. They'd lean over the cubicle wall for a high five, or they'd say, "Henna, that sounds awesome. Tell us all about it." Or on my favorite days, we'd go out to happy hour to celebrate. But the days look different now. And even if there were people nearby, how would I even share that win without coming across as braggy? Ruby doesn't judge me, but people do. But as professionals in a hybrid world, we need to share our wins at work more than ever in order to be perceived as competent. And being perceived as competent directly correlates to other important professional traits too, like trustworthiness, ability, and performance. Stanford University professor Jack Nasher discovered that competence doesn't speak for itself, and that intentionally projecting an image of expertise, in other words, sharing our wins out loud, is required in order to make a good impression on others. And withholding our wins comes with real danger too. We find ourselves passed over for promotions, raises, and new opportunities. Even if our work is superior to other people's, it ends up overshadowed by the person who is louder, who lets their wins be seen, heard, and not cast aside in favor of the next thing. So in this world of working from home in my polka dot pajama pants, the new question is, how do I share my wins when the world tells me bragging is bad? And is there even such a thing as good bragging? And if so, what does it look like? Now, before we talk about what it looks like, let me back up a bit. What makes something a brag anyway? My definition of a brag is a sharing of wins with others. So I'm not talking about those moments of quietly cheering yourself on at home or the self-high five, right? By definition, there can't be a brag without another, be it in live conversation, via text, or in a social media post. And so many people struggle with this. I partner closely with several leading women's leadership organizations, and the reluctance to brag is an issue that comes up in nearly every conversation. They struggle to even claim their wins for fear of coming across as a bad bragger. So the idea of sharing them feels like a huge leap. But I've learned in my own career, which includes 2 total career pivots, as well as that of many of my clients, that sharing our wins and bragging continues to lead to much of our own success and influence. And we're generally not accumulating haters along the way. So what do we know that everyone else doesn't? We've learned that there's a difference between bad bragging and good bragging. And this difference is critical because when we don't untangle the two, we view all bragging as the same. We fear coming across as a bad bragger, so we don't brag at all, which means we miss out on all of those benefits of sharing our wins with others. And we know the bad bragger type. Many of us have strong internalized messages about that type. It's not polite to brag. Don't be a show-off. Even the mere suggestion of bragging brings up fear of sounding self-promotional or obnoxious, like the worst bragger we know. We don't want to sound like him, and research suggests it's usually a him. Fear of triggering someone else's insecurities, and most of all, fear of not being liked. We worry that in an effort to be seen as more competent, people won't like us for it. And data confirms that being liked does play an important role in our success. In a joint study out of Harvard and Duke, researchers found that if someone is strongly disliked, it's almost irrelevant whether or not they're competent. People won't want to work with them anyway. And the truth is, our fears are pretty valid, because when we brag that way, we're hyper-focused on publicizing our competence, which does boost it a few points, but it doesn't come across as very likable. This is why bad bragging feels so bad. And today, we need both. Numerous studies confirm that the key to professional success in the modern workplace is conveying both competence and likability. So, in order to avoid that ding to our likability, what do we try instead? Usually one of three things. Number one, the wait and see method, especially favored by women. Our leaders and peers will eventually see all the great things we've done somehow. Competence speaks for itself, right? Remember Jack Nasher? It doesn't. Number two, we enlist a champion. Maybe if we share our wins with someone of influence, maybe they'll brag about us. Maybe they'll brag on our behalf so we won't have to. Maybe my puppy Ruby will learn how to talk. Or number three, if we do share our wins, we minimize the amount of hours and effort it took. Or we use words like we instead of I. We spread the credit around like it's Nutella on a crepe. But these efforts just aren't enough anymore in the hybrid workplace. With many of our professional colleagues working miles away instead of just over the cubicle wall, we now need to be louder and more proactive. So, if bad bragging is so bad, and it's clear that we need to be doing something more than what we're currently doing, why is it still so hard to figure out what good bragging actually looks like? The reason is when it comes to bragging, we fused together the action of it with the intention of it. And the difference between bad bragging and good bragging comes down to intention, because it's the intention of bragging that sets how the action is received. And we run into issues when we falsely believe that the act of bragging always comes with a negative intention, or that it'll even be perceived that way. So what is the negative intention that gets us in trouble? When we're bad bragging, we're sharing our wins in order to be validated by others, to have our competence acknowledged and endorsed by others. And when people can sense that intention for validation, it dings our likability. This explains why humble bragging doesn't work. I just can't understand how I got the biggest bonus when we're all on the same team. We're trying to come across as likable. We want to be likable, but we're still hungry for that validation. So we think if we sugarcoat our brag in faux humility, maybe people won't hate us for it. But researchers find that humble braggers are viewed as even less likable than people who straight up brag, or even people who complain, because we can still sniff out that desire for validation. So remember, today, now we need that blend for success, competence and likability. So what can we do differently? How can we appear competent without sacrificing likability? What shift to our intention can we make? How can we get back in balance? It turns out Nothing is more likable than celebrating others. Because the truth is, we love to be celebrated ourselves. So when we mirror that feeling out, when we do it for other people, it's a powerful way to raise our likability. So to be a good bragger, instead of solo validation, shift your intention to social celebration. If your focus is strictly on validating your own competence, on building yourself up and celebrating yourself purely to earn the validation of others, often at the exclusion of others, you risk coming across as a bad bragger and not very likable. But when you shift your intention to social celebration, to celebrate your wins solo, as well as the wins of others socially, remember, everyone likes that and everyone benefits. This is the key difference between bad bragging and good bragging. Instead of sharing your wins in order to be validated by others, when we're good bragging, we're sharing our wins in order to celebrate with others. And new research out of George Mason University gives us a great way to do this, and it affirms this as well. The researchers in the study found that self-promotion isn't harmful and doesn't reduce likability as long as it's combined with other promotion. We can hype ourselves up and confidently give airtime to our wins as long as we simultaneously hype others up too. Combining self-promotion and other promotion, which they call dual promotion, helps us come across as competent and warm and likable so that we can make an even stronger impression on others. In other words, the secret sauce of success isn't either or, it's both and. And when we shift our intention to social celebration, the impact of bragging is much different. So what can you do now to work more social celebration into your life? Activate your professional hype squad. You might immediately think of someone who does this with you already. Someone who celebrates your wins even when you don't. Sometimes you need to lean into someone else's excitement about your win until yours kicks in. So as you're building your bragging muscle, practice being a really good hype squad member for others. Did someone share one of their wins with you in passing? Don't let them off the hook. Don't let the moment end there. Stop them and say, wait, this sounds exciting. Tell me more. I want to hear about this. Let's celebrate that. Practice taking delight in the wins of others. And in turn, allow others to take delight in the wins of you. Now, to be clear, as you embrace good bragging in your life, there will always be certain people who won't want to give you credit for your intention, who struggle to separate the action from the intention. Sometimes this can be rooted in cultural norms, where likability is often judged on other terms. Sometimes it's the way we were raised. Sometimes the action alone is enough to trigger someone else's insecurity. This isn't for everyone always. But even in this context, you can activate your professional hype squad by finding the likability triggers of that culture or group. For example, crediting family, or God, or Anderson Cooper. But finding your way to socially celebrate your wins is the key. Also, quick tip, your hype squad should want you to win. When you've done something well, they should be the first ones to start clapping and the last ones to stop. And if they aren't, maybe get a new hype squad. Ultimately, as humans who want to be liked, good bragging feels awkward at first. We're not all used to it yet. But not sharing your wins doesn't mean they didn't happen. Too much of your professional success depends on you sharing them. How will we know if you don't tell us? The world wants to hear your wins because it isn't even bragging if you've done it, and it isn't bad bragging if both your action and intention lift others up in the process. Too often, we leave our admiration and celebration unspoken. The world has plenty of humility and even more critics. So please, good brag your heart out about the people you love and about yourself. We'll be celebrating right along with you. Thank you.